What's poppin', everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Zach Lesage here. Today we're going to be covering over the top 10 best decks in Standard as we approach Portland Regionals. There's been a little bit of a shift this week, and you wouldn't necessarily think there'd be a shift from where we left off at San Antonio to Portland when there weren't any major events, but online events are happening all the time, league challenges, league cups, and just in general, top players streaming their games. Without further ado, let's check out this list. Let's jump into it. Kicking things off with Lost Zone Radzard, we have Lost Zone Radzard at number 10. If you haven't already, put your best guesses for the top 10 in the comments below. We'll see what it's like. No peeking in the pinned comment that has access to all the deck lists that are copy and pastable. No peeking in the description because I have put timestamps for all of the best decks. This deck seems to be falling off a little bit, and I mean, I just think that people are more gravitating towards Lost Zone Tina, Lost Zone Toolbox, other Lost Zone variants, because this deck doesn't necessarily have the craziest matchup spread. Like, you could still lose to decks like Charizard, in my opinion, even with the Technical Machine de-evolution. So this deck might not just be scratching that itch for those players. However, with Lost Zone Tina seeing a lot of success, this is one of the best matchups. This deck is one of the decks that just beats that, so we might see a little bit of resurgence as Tina looks to spike up a little bit towards Portland. No cheating, no kind of foreshadowing, but Tina might be on this list. That being said, I think that Radzard is a solid deck, and most of the decks in the top 10, I can even say most of the decks that are relatively within the top 20, are valid picks for any event to see success. Like, I could really see Radzard winning the regionals, and it's at number 10. So if that says anything about this list, I think that we could kind of see any of the top 20 decks winning the regionals. Maybe not at the same frequency rate. However, I think that SableZard, Radzard, Lost Zone, whatever, is a solid pick for this event. Storming its way into our number 9 spot is Roaring Moon EX, the turbo version. Now, we've seen a few cup wins here and there with this deck, and I have to give a shout out to Brandon Vaughn, who's been playing this deck, to a few cup wins, as far as I could tell on Twitter, heavily inspired by their version of the list. Made a couple changes there. This version's really, like, aggressive on the Radiant Greninja, so that you could kind of go Professor Sada's, move those energies to the Radiant Greninja, and board wipe your opponent. If your opponent is playing Charizard and isn't necessarily expecting the Roaring Moon matchup, and why would they? This deck largely hasn't been on this list in, I want to say, months now. They might not necessarily understand that. On top of having a near auto win against Rapid Strike, Snorlax, and being able to hold its own against a few other decks just due to sheer power alone, Roaring Moon looks like it might make a splash at Portland and at Charlotte or whatever upcoming events you're playing in, just due to its pure and aggressive speed. I think that this deck could spike a little bit higher, and I'm glad that it's finally getting its flowers, because this deck has largely been underestimated and kind of talked down to by a lot of players. And I might be a little bit guilty to that myself, but as the metagame's kind of grown, there's kind of a spot here for it where there should have always been a spot for it. So if you're a Roaring Moon fan, let me know in the comments below. Give this video a like, share, subscribe with your friends, and yeah, let's jump into our number 8 pick. I wonder what it could be. Sliding into our number 8 spot is Mew Path. I'm not sure entirely where to ever place this deck, because anytime it seems like it's not high up on this list, that's when players drop their tombs, and this deck slides up a few spots. And I think that this is either the most overestimated deck or underestimated deck at the same time, because it's just hitting for a large amount of damage and path judging your opponent. Not much has changed from this list. I still think it's Andrew's list from San Antonio. So if you're looking to play this deck, it's sick. You could pick up a League Battle deck and maybe a loose pack of Fusion Strike or something like that. A few singles from any of our sponsors and figure that out. If you are looking for any of the cards from our sponsors, check out deckoutgaming.ca and atlascollectibles.com. They have access to sealed singles, graded, whatever you're looking for to build these decks. Not that you'd want to use graded cards to pick up the decks, but maybe you want to get a graded commemorative trophy for yourself. You could also pick up some PTCG live codes from PTCGLstore.com to build this deck online using all the codes available in our description. So check those out. Let's see what we got coming up next. Kicking it into our number 7 spot is Lost Zone Toolbox without Sableye. This seems like it's a take on the Christian Hodis deck. And I mean, I almost sound surprised when it's like, I'm still looking at this list, and every time I look at it, it's like, seems a little bit interesting. But the goal of this deck is to not reach 10 in the Lost Zone. I mean, you could. And you probably could. Like, you will, maybe. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying you won't. But you scale up with Comfey, Colress, Cramor, then you attack with Cramorant, then you choose which techs, and you kind of build your own deck mid-game, and Mirage Gate, Raihan, super effective glasses your way to victory. A lot of Pokemon are weak to the popular types in these decks, and there's just a lot of opportunities to blow something up with Roaring Moon, or knock out a single prize card Pokemon with Iron Hands. And even like knocking out a Miraidon Pokemon with Minior can be absolutely like, it's just like, whoa, right? So there's a lot of cool things that you got going on in this deck. I could see myself cutting a Grass Energy for an extra Super Rod. That's the one thing that I've been kind of like thinking about, and it keeps me up at night, and I talk to my plushies, and you know what I'm saying? Like, it's one of those things. But this is a pretty cool deck, kind of emerging. Lists might change, text might change, but solid deck for sure. Blasting its way into our number 6 spot is Miraidon EX, the non-turbo version, even though this deck is quite aggressive. There are 2 versions of Miraidon, one playing 18 lightning energies, one playing 13, 14 lightning energies. This is the less turbo version of this. Just sticking with the same list that we had last week, because I think it's generally like a default very solid list. And I expect most Miraidon lists to be looking like this one, or they're going to be playing Nick Robinson's top 8 list from San Antonio. I actually have to build the second copy of this in real life. So as we kind of go through the metagame and see wherever it's going, I think that this version is just generally more consistent because it's based off of Yuho's list that won LEIC. That list has largely seen more success than the turbo turn 1 attack kind of deck. So, and even, again, I should note, this deck can attack turn 1 and often does attack turn 1. The other one just does it slightly better at the cost of some mid-game consistency. So, I think that this version is just better across the board right now, but that might change. Miraidon's good regardless, and it's number 6. The one thing that I do want to note is, like, Miraidon is kind of falling down a little bit because the top decks are becoming increasingly more difficult matchups. So keep that in mind if you're a Miraidon player. I know that there's some Miraidon players that have been struggling to see success or the same level of success. You do not have the greatest Charizard matchup. You do not have, like, your matchup is good against Gardevoir, but how many other decks on the top 5 are you really seeing success against? So this is why I always recommend having more than one deck that you play. Don't trade your cards away. Just try different decks at all times, because the metagame can shift and put you in an awkward spot where you're not seeing the same level of success that you did before. It's not you, it's your deck, which I guess is controlled by you, but keep that in mind. We have a lot of tips and stuff like this that you could chat with the squad, or long form articles, special videos, discount codes in our Patreon. So check it out at patreon.com/TSSWin. It's like $10 a month. It's 2024. Get good with the Travel Squad. We'd love to see you there. We're now at the middle of the list, and Gardevoir is forcing its way in there at number 5. Now, Gardevoir is in a similar predicament to Miraidon, where we've kind of looked around and we're like, hey, the metagame's kind of forced their hand against us and kind of countered us. Because Gardevoir at one point was the best deck in formats. So a lot of the matchups have become kind of a little bit Gardevoir immune, and that's led players to not play Gardevoir as well. So the players that are playing Gardevoir are either the absolute best Gardevoir players. However, the best players in the game are currently not playing Gardevoir. And that's not to say a stab at anyone or nothing like that, because I love a lot of Gardevoir players out there. A lot of y'all are like homies. And do your thing, collect those top 32s, top 16s, whatever. Gardevoir just hasn't been performing to the same standards that it was before, and it's really going to change things up on how the deck is played going forward. That being said, this is really where Gardevoir is at. I think Gardevoir could win the tournament. There's a lot of decks that it has to go through to get there first, and the way that the metagame shifted, there's not necessarily the same matchup spread that I had before around the time of LAIC. So if you haven't been playing in a couple months and you've been going from like around October, November at the start of Paradox to where we are now, Gardevoir just is not necessarily hitting the same, and the deck can be a little bit long to play. I still think Gardevoir is great, and I think if you like Gardevoir, continue to play Gardevoir because it's worthwhile to pick up those very hard to get top 32s, top 16s, whatever. I just don't necessarily see it hitting as much as the decks that we're about to see after this. Blocking its way to the format at number 4 is Snorlax. I most recently played in a 1K, and everyone was playing Charizard. There was a handful of Miraidons, maybe a couple Guardies. No one played Rapid Strike. There was a handful of Lost Zone box decks, and there were 2 Snorlax players that one made top 8, one made top 4. Snorlax absolutely like dominated that event, and obviously like we can't scale everything, but it seems like there's players out there that are like, we can play Snorlax, and yeah, we might have a tough Lost Tina matchup, and auto loss even, but we win against pretty much everything else. Because Charizard has no answers to this deck right now. You cannot beat this deck with Charizard unless you're teching against this deck with Minior, Escape Rope, Turo, like some other cards that you need. And really, this deck is only going to struggle against decks like Roaring Moon, Lost Zone Box, Lost Tina, stuff like that. So if you avoid those decks and you hit other decks in the top, like Rapid Strike, or even you catch a Gardevoir off guard, there's nothing that they could do. So I think that Snorlax it's well positioned as we go forward. I don't necessarily think players are playing counters. However, I do think this deck is going to have an uptick just with how much Charizard is going to see success. It's more like, I always put it like this thing, and I don't know if it's just like in my head, salmon swimming up the stream, right? You're trying to dodge the bears on the way that are hungry to eat the salmon. But you know that the salmon are going to make it to the kind of point that they're trying to go up the river to just chill there and vibe. And that's where like paradise is. So you're swimming through the tournament of the regionals, and you're trying to avoid all of these Lost Tinas that are probably going to be like 20% of the field because the deck's bussin' right now. If you avoid the Lost Tinas with this deck, you are in the promised land of Charizards, and you're probably spiking a top 8. You might not win the top 8, but top 8 at a regionals is pretty sick, right? So it's one of those things where that's where Snorlax is positioned in my mind. You're avoiding a few bad matchups, like almost every single deck, but there's a lot of matchups that do not want to see Snorlax and are not prepared against Snorlax. So Snorlax is absolutely sick. That's the reason why it's at number 4. Spiraling its way into number 3 is Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX. Now, if we see how the decks are kind of placed out, we're getting to a point where we're countering Charizard, and that's kind of how the rest of the top decks are working. Now, we'll figure out the rest of the list, and I'll explain it in a little bit, but this deck's up here because it has a decent Lost Zone box matchup, and a favorable, slightly favorable Charizard matchup. This deck can be an absolute brickfest, and I arguably think that Rapid Strike Urshifu is the brickiest deck in a format. So you could just hit the wrong matchup, you could just not get set up, and this deck will hurt you. I feel like I got wronged by this deck at San Antonio just by hitting decks like Roaring Moon, or just being like, I completely bricked, or I got turn 1 Miraidon. But I think that Rapid Strike Urshifu, if you can get past that, a list like this is incredibly consistent because we have access to pretty much everything we want, and going with 4 Battle VIP Pass, 3 Forest Sealstone is certainly going to help you get past that brickiness of this deck. The big change that I've made here is I found through my bulk the Remoraid from Paradox Rift that has 70 HP. It is not a Rapid Strike card. However, if I start with it, it's either getting knocked out and I bench the other one, or mid to late games, it's stronger against Lost Zone Box, Entei Valiance, and Rapid Strike Mirror. It's worthwhile the 1-1 split because you're not always going to start with it. You could bench it mid-game, and you evolve it, and then it's a Rapid Strike Pokemon again. So, not really a big change, but small changes like that can be the difference between someone playing a 60 HP Charmander and a 70 HP Charmander and getting farmed by this matchup, or maybe having a chance. So, if I were you, I'd look through your bulk, or express order one from the vendors. Maybe they have some, I'm not sure. But that card's sick. I just have to go through my bulk to find it. Impacting its way into the number 2 spot this week is Lost Tina. Now, Lost Tina is a deck that I loved, then I hated, and I think we're on good terms again because this is what I just won my 1K tournament with. Lost Tina has very solid matchups. It struggles against Mew a little bit, and Lost Zone matchups can be even slightly unfavorable. Everything else in the format is good, favorable, and auto-win like Snorlax. So, like, even decks like Rapid Strike that are designed to beat Lost Zone Box don't always beat this deck. And this is Grant Hayes' second place list from San Antonio Regionals. One thing that I've been experimenting with is adding in a second boss because sometimes your deck takes off because your opponent's path locked. Cards that I've been cutting and experimenting for that are Sableye. Just one Sableye, because I think sometimes you can get away with it. I've cut either Roxanne or Iono, and the only other card that I've been cutting is Countercatcher. So opportunities there to kind of see if there's anything you might want to change. But this deck is just, you have options to pathlock your opponents. You're incredibly well positioned because Star Requiem knocking out these EX Pokemon that have a large amount of HP is great. And Sableye is like the most broken single prize card Pokemon in the game. So we have a lot of the most broken, like we have the most broken stadium in the game, probably trainer cards in the game with Path, Countercatcher, Roxanne, on top of a consistent engine of Lost Zone. So keep it in mind, put your best guesses for the best deck in the comments below. I'm sure you already know, and if you haven't already checked out the pinned comment, that has all of the deck lists available, some video references for most, and you could copy and paste those deck lists right into PTCG Live. I got you. If you don't want to if you don't necessarily want to copy and paste, feel free to watch this video over and over and over and over again, even while you sleep, to really boost up the views. Really does help out the Shuffle Squad. So if you're ever like, how can I help out the Shuffle Squad? I don't necessarily have a bajillion dollars. Watch our videos, like our tweets. And when I say watch our videos, you can also just like put them on your desk, put it on mute, and just like watch it on one of your monitors all day, over and over again. You'll get better at Pokemon, trust me. We have some really good members on this team. So yeah, let's see what our number 1 deck is. Here we have it, our number 1 deck, Charizard EX. Who would have ever guessed it? I've talked about Charizard EX almost the entirety of this video without talking about Charizard EX. This is really where the list is built up. And it's one of those things where Charizard has been seeing a lot of success. Charizard is immune to most of the decks that are trying to counter it because it still wins against Tina sometimes. It still wins against Rapid Strike sometimes. There's lines of play here and just overall strength when it comes down to Infernal Rain, Burning Darkness, the consistency of Pidgeot, Mew, Rotom, Lumineon, Battle VIP Pass, Arven, Forest Steel Stone is just unheard of. And yeah, I think that this deck is just sick. This particular build has everything that I'm looking for in the deck. So if you're like, hey, you want to know what? Like, to me, this is a perfect 60. And it's pretty close to that for the format. Like, could we cut Turo? Yeah, we could, but it's really good against Mirror. If you're trying to find a spot for Minior, maybe cut a Countercatcher. That's the best thing that I could possibly ever say. I don't even know if Minior beats your opponent if they play more than one Mimikyu. So keep that in mind. I think that this Charizard list is just sick. So if you're looking for a sick Charizard list to bring to Portland, or League Cups or League Challenges, I'd say this one's the one. To me, Charizard is just absolutely like disgustingly good as a deck. And if you're looking to try to get championship points, Charizard seems like a solid play. Let me close things out. So we still have Charizard on top of the metagame heading into Portland. I assume it's going to be the most played deck that we're going to see. I mean, I've played in a 1K event. My wife played in a League Challenge. It seems like Charizard is everywhere. Is it the same for you? Let me know in the comments. Totally love to get back to every single person here. Give me your top decks that you're going to be playing at Portland. Give me some content that you want to watch. Let's just strike up a conversation. I do get back to every single message, so make sure that you get those messages in. Subscribe to the channel. We are so close to 20,000 subs. Tell your friends about it. Tell your granddad's dog about it. Whoever you need to do. Let's get to 20,000 subs. That'd be absolutely sick to kick off 2024. And give this video a like too. That would really be helpful. We really appreciate all the help here. Again, shout out to our sponsors, PTCGL Store, Deckout Gaming, and Atlas Collectibles, Ultimate Guard, and check out our Patreon at patreon.com/TSSWin. If you got it all the way to this point, you're a homie. I'll catch up with all y'all later. Peace out and have a great one. Want to support the Shuffle Squad? Be sure to check out all of our sponsors in the description to pick up Pokemon TCG singles, sealed, and PTCG live codes. Hey trainers, tired of having too many cards lying around? I know that feeling, and I know what a hassle it is to try and sell those cards. But selling bulk is now easier than ever with TCG Bulk. Find tons of potential buyers in a single place. You just download the app, look for the best buyer near you, and carefully pack your bulk, ship it, and you get paid. It really is that simple. Turn the cards you don't want into the cards you absolutely need for your next deck. You made it to the end. Thank you so much for watching this entire video from the Shuffle Squad. Honestly, from the bottom of our hearts, we appreciate each and every person that supports our content, watches what we have going on every single day, every single week, even from time to time, and continuously allows us to have a forum to project our creative content towards the Pokemon TCG community. So if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and even leave a comment to help boost the YouTube algorithm. That being said, we'll catch you with our next video. Thanks again. Take it easy.